Come in quickly. Come in quickly. He hasn't started yet. Thank you for waiting, though. Appreciate that. By the way, if I haven't said that before, if somebody is speaking, you guys should wait and come in between the speeches. All right.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Christopher Thomas Dietrich Steele. And for my claim of fact speech today, my claim and my thesis for my point is that investing in green energy faster than its current rate Investing in green energy faster than its current rate will replace the jobs which were lost in the coal mining industry from 2011 and 2016. Before I go any further, there are a couple terms I'd like to go over. First is green energy, and green energy is any source of energy that does not emit, or that emits very little to no carbon dioxide, also that doesn't use any sort of fossil fuels like coal or black oil. Also, there's also the Rust Belt that I need to go over, which is the part of the United States, in eastern United States, that most of the manufacturing, like coal mining jobs are, and that have been suffering from 2011 to 2016. So, how many jobs were lost in this part of the world, in our country, the people that our citizens with us? Well, the Bureau of Labor Statistics from 2011 to 2016, the coal mining industry has lost 110,000 jobs. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of jobs. And that's not just underground mining people. That's also overground mining. That's the blue-collar guys, the office guys, the managers, all those people. The Rust Belt was hit the hardest. That's just where these jobs are. That's where they were, at least. And from the U.S. Energy and Information Administration, there are 3 places that were hit the hardest within the Rust Belt because they have the most mines, the most jobs, especially currently, and that is in West Virginia, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania. And these states, not just those 3, all around the Rust Belt, they have very little to no infrastructure in green energy. There's like no whatsoever. They don't have any kind of solar, they don't have any kind of geothermal, they have nothing. So this could change their infrastructure. This could boost their economy rapidly if they just started investing now. Before I go any further, there are 5 jobs that they could start implementing, that they could keep going and putting in and replacing these jobs that were lost within the coal mining industry. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are 5, which is renewable energy, there's energy efficiency, there is pollution reduction and removal, and there is also resource conservation and environmental compliance. So, first one, renewable. Renewable energy is the field of energy like solar, wind, geothermal, and hydropower types of energy. It's just essentially like the types of energy that you'd be getting from doing green energy, essentially. But let's take Kentucky, for example, one of the 3 big names that I've mentioned. Kentucky is kind of landlocked. They don't have a large ocean or body of water, so you can't do a hydropower plant in the middle of Kentucky because there's no water. There's just boring and plain flatness. So in Kentucky, actually, according to a map provided by the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, they could have a very high yield of wind energy if they put in the wind, like spinny wind turbines, right? Everyone's seen those in photos. If they do that, they could yield a lot of energy from that. Also solar energy, like that's just an example of what kind of jobs that they could start implementing. The second type that I need to go over is energy efficiency, which just tries to improve on energy efficiency, like storage and distribution of the energy, updating faulty technology, machinery, and whatnot. And the third one that I'm going to be going over is pollution reduction, removal, and greenhouse gases, recycling, reuse, long game. What this does is it reduces carbon dioxide emissions, or just in the air in general, and it could reduce oil spills, like the big ones like BP. That's still not fixed. It still needs to be fixed. So having these places have their jobs go to that area and help clean it up, having more people that don't have a job, they could go over there and they could help fix it. Like let me keep going. Also, with the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, that's a thing. The size of Texas, a giant patch of garbage in the middle of the ocean. That's what the pollution reduction, removal, greenhouse gases, recycling, and reuse part of this would help fix. And the last one I'm going to be going over is natural resource conservation, which essentially what it does, it conserves the energy that you've gained so we don't overuse it. And the last one, environmental compliance, education, and training. This is just going over like the training of the job that these people would be taking over instead of just being unemployed. If they started implementing these jobs, this is the type of job that would inform them on how to do their job properly. So, how many jobs would be created? What does this all add up to? From the International Renewable Energy Agency, or IRENA, calculated that currently there are 720,000 jobs in renewable energy already. And those states that I mentioned before, West Virginia, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, they don't have any. So they should start getting on top of their game because there's a lot of jobs. And as I said, 110,000 versus 720,000. In a couple of years, come on, they could completely erase that and add more jobs. And as I'm going over my time, the U.S. Energy Act Employment Report predicts a 14% increase for 2016, averaging 260,000 new jobs, 15% increase in solar, wind in next year. Solar, there's currently 209,000 people within the industry in the U.S., and by 2021, this is also going to be growing exponentially, and within the next couple of years, adding 150,000 new employees. With my closing, the increase of jobs in green energy field overall, if these states were to actually begin investing now, they would ride this bubble and join in on the employment and reduce their unemployment rate for these people that don't have their jobs right now. And with these projected growths in jobs within green energy, there's no end to how many jobs that this would create. If the Rust Belt put more investment into green energy infrastructure, they would quell the heavy loss of jobs suffered from 2011 and 2016. Thank you. Wow, 6 minutes.
Yeah. Probably.
He's like, for asking, you go last. I'm excited. You want to show something?
All right, Chris, you identified the proposition at the beginning of the speech, and you're trying to be very clear about it, which I appreciate, but it's a long proposition with multiple components to it. So you probably want to simplify your argument a little bit more. There's not really a preview of what the supporting material is, what the supporting claims are going to be. There's a preview of what some of the jobs are going to be, but you don't necessarily make claims about those particular jobs. It's basically an informative speech about what these particular job categories are, rather than an explanation about how those jobs can be developed if there was more money or energy spent on them in the places where they don't invest in those sorts of things. So I'm getting a classification of the different categories of jobs rather than the inferential argument that says the reason that we don't have these jobs is because they're not putting money or effort into developing them. There's the closest that I get is you make a reference to one piece of information that talks about the jobs in those 3 states that you mentioned, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania. And it says they've got no infrastructure for green energy. And I'm going, that's based on looking at a map. I'm not exactly sure.
No, that's not what the map's supposed to be referencing.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
But, like I'm saying, who says that there's no infrastructure? That's the argument. They don't have this. They're depending on these other things. They need to get this infrastructure. So I'm thinking, so there is no solar industry, there's no wind energy, there's no hydroelectric, there's no. That's what you're saying, is that they don't have any of those things in those particular places. you get a little carried away sometimes on some of the minor issues that divert you off into another subject. Like you mentioned, Kentucky being landlocked, and so there's not any. First of all, it is landlocked. That's fine. So, by the way, so is West Virginia, and most 99% of Pennsylvania also. But you don't need to be on the ocean to have access to hydroelectric power. That comes primarily from rivers and dams and lakes and that kind of stuff. So that would be something that you ought to be aware of. But as soon as you say that, okay, I'm starting to think, okay, so these are location-based kinds of things. So how is it that these coal miners who are unemployed are all now going to get jobs in the Caribbean cleaning up the BPS mess, or end up in the middle of the Pacific Ocean doing that sort of thing? That's the problem when you kind of phrase it the way you do, that it invites that kind of question, which is not really the argument that you want people to be thinking about. You want people to be thinking about what the job expansion possibilities are in all these places. In essence, if I want to leave West Virginia, leave Kentucky, and leave Pennsylvania, I can find a job someplace else. That doesn't address the issue that you're talking about. What you were talking about is they need to develop an infrastructure in those places to have these green energies. So you go off on some tangents as well. And I think what happens is that you use this classification of jobs and possible job areas, use that as your structure instead of building an argument around the thing that's problematic, and that's the lack of investment in those particular areas. And so that creates a problem for you. I did think that you had some good information about the different kinds of jobs. I appreciated that, but it's not always as well cited as it could be. And like I said, I think that whenever you have a piece of factual data, you're pretty good about citing a source on that. You mentioned the U.S. Energy Information Resource Organization, and then there's the BLS at the beginning. I thought that was pretty good, and then we got IRENA at the end, so I appreciated that you were presenting citations on that. But like I said, it's often a piece of factual data as opposed to information about where the absence of infrastructure is, or how people could transition to those kinds of jobs, and I think that that's what's missing in the speech. All right, thank you.